It's time for the Margin Matters Minute with Money Man Jason Brown.
All right, welcome to another edition of the Margin Matters Minute. My name is Jason Brown. Thank you so much for joining us today. And today we are continuing our topic on how to teach kids about money, and more specifically, why money isn't taught in schools. Now, today I have a very special guest joining us who is very knowledgeable on this topic, Mr. Kalen Bruce, who is joining us. Kalen is actually a financial freedom coach and the owner and founder of Freedom Sprout and freedomsprout.com. He is also the author of a book titled Intentional Children: Raising Money Smart, Mindful Kids of Intention and Purpose. And he has quite the experience with this topic because Kalen is a husband and father of 5 kids, ranging from ages 3 to 15. And also, I want to take a moment to share with everyone, Kalen is also an active member of the United States Air Force. So I do want to thank you, Kalen, for your service. Thank you so much. We're very, very appreciative of you and everything that you do to protect our country. And I will let the viewers know that this is actually an international interview because Kalen is currently stationed in Japan in the Amori region. And I am in Atlanta, Georgia, so we are 13-hour time difference. So we had to be very creative when we scheduled this interview. So I want to say thank you so much, Kalen, for joining us. I really appreciate you having us.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a topic that I'm passionate about, so I'm ready to talk about it.
So the reason why I wanted to have Kalen on is because Kalen actually wrote a blog and he did a video, and we'll link all this in the description below, of why. The title is Why Isn't Finance Taught in School? And he actually had 5 reasons that he cited in his blog as why aren't kids being taught money in school? So we're actually going to go through all those 5 reasons in this interview here. But before we dive into that, Kalen, I actually want to, and I said this to you as well, there is some hope, because I actually read an article recently, I actually read it right here, an article recently on CNBC that's titled Teaching Financial Education in Schools is Finally Catching On. And I just have to read this, and I'll link this in the description below too. If you guys want to read the article, I'll have that there too. I just have to read the lead of this article because I think it's hysterical. It says, research shows that kids who learn to manage money when they're young will be able to better handle their finances as an adult. And I just started laughing. I was like, they actually had to do a research to figure this out. Like, that was funny. But the main gist of this article was another. Actually, this is actually an interesting statistic that I didn't know. It's talking about how there's a movement right now. People like you, Kalen, are probably starting this movement of getting money taught in schools and why it's so vital and important. In this article, it says, up until recently, only 17 states required high school students to take at least one class in personal finance. So some people might read that as, wow, that's progress. But I read it, I was actually astonished that it was that many. I was astonished that it was 17 states. I was like, wow, I didn't know there was any states that were, but that actually, I was like, wow, 17 states, that's way more than I thought. So this actually was an encouraging article that was saying that, things are starting to happen. People are starting to wake up to this, such an important topic of teaching kids about money in school. And to me, it's a life survival skill that is so important. And Kalen, I know you know that too. So let's go ahead and we'll just dive right into your blog now. So you pointed out 5 different reasons, and I'm sure there's more than 5, but we'll just talk about these first. And then if you have any extras you want to throw in. So the first reason that you pointed out why finance is not taught in school is only 1 in 5 teachers feels qualified to lead a personal finance class. So tell us more about that. Why is that?
Sure. I think that comes down to people in general and their finances. And obviously that I thought the lead was hilarious with that article as well. Like If you teach kids about money when they're young, they're going to be better with money as an adult. And that's true, but most people don't know what they're doing with their finances. I mean, and I know you know that, and that's the norm. And it's not that teachers know any better than the parents at the school. Just because they're a teacher in math or science or whatever the subject, that doesn't mean that they know anything about financial education. And a lot of the teachers are struggling too, not just because of teacher salaries in general, but because of knowing what to do with their money and budgeting and just the basics of finances. They weren't taught that in school, and now they're teaching schools, and they're not teaching it in their schools either. And I was surprised too to see how high that number was of the schools that are the states that are acquiring finance to be taught in schools, because I definitely seems like it was lower. I started Freedom Sprout a few years ago, and it literally does seem like it was lower just a few years ago. And I have seen more articles about that recently. So I am thinking it's starting to catch on. And I think a lot of finance bloggers in general, now that everyone has the option to have their own voice heard on the web, and if they can grow their blog, they can get their voice heard. You don't have to publish a book. Now these topics are being talked about. It's not just a bunch of books written for business people. They're written for parents too, and they're written about these subjects and about kids and finances and stuff that honestly isn't a super profitable area to write about. And people in general, maybe selfishly, call it what you will, they want to focus on themselves. And whenever people are picking out books, they want to figure out how to get better with their money. They aren't even considering teaching their kids. And then now with this whole movement of maybe we should consider teaching our kids, whether you're in a good financial spot or not, your kids could be. And that's kind of what led to all the finance bloggers talking about this, and to me starting Freedom Sprout and the whole thing.
Very good, man. Yeah, that's so true. Everything that you say, and it's just, it's one of those things where, when you were talking, I was thinking to myself, and I almost feel like it's too late for me now. But I have two boys. I have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I want to instill in them the knowledge and skill set of how to manage money without having fear and anxiety of it. And so many people in our society, there's the famous saying, if you don't control your money will control you. And when
Absolutely.
your money controls you, that gives you all that fear and anxiety because you don't have the skill set to manage your money. So then the money takes control of you, and then it's not good. You don't have that it's that financial literacy that you need. So for me, I want to I think that every parent's goal is they want their kids to grow up and be self-sustaining, right? Self-sufficient. I don't want my kids to be 35 years old and still living at home and not able to manage money and not able to live on their own. So there's so many wonderful qualities of teaching kids about money that will just really help generations and generations of kids. So the second one, Kalen, actually is kind of piggybacking off the first one. So the second reason that you cited as to why finance isn't taught in school is it says we don't have enough instructors to teach financial classes or finance classes. And it says, see, reason number one. So expound a little bit on that. So why don't we? Is it just a lack of education, or are the teachers not getting that, I guess, education of that subject to teach to the kids?
Yeah, that's a lot of it. I think kind of like you said with these first 2 points, you'll see that a lot of these points do kind of flow together. It almost makes one big, it makes an explanation when you mix them all together. And we don't have enough instructors because obviously if the teachers don't feel qualified, then that's less and less teachers. So we may have a certain number of teachers feeling qualified to teach math or science, but the number of teachers who feel qualified in their own finances to the point to where they could teach personal finance and things like that, we just don't have the numbers. And obviously I know I have no idea what the numbers are as far as how schools are hurting for teachers. Obviously some subjects are hurting more than others, and it really just depends on the year because it kind of changes every few years. But finances is definitely one of those things that kind of gets dropped by the wayside, and it's just not it's not talked about. And then that kind of goes back to money being kind of a taboo subject, and we don't talk about money. And I did kind of think it was funny, just as a side note, that like sex education actually seems to be getting more popular and common in schools. It's less of a taboo subject, which is, that's whatever. But finances still, in some cases, seems to be even more taboo than sex education in schools. It's like they're more afraid to talk about it because a lot of people seem to think it's more personal, which may be kind of the whole thing, that we've somehow made finances such a personal thing. I always like to say that my parents never talked about finances with me, but their parents really didn't talk about finances. Back in the baby boomer and before that, even, it was just, you didn't discuss finances as an American. I will say this is mostly an American thing, where you just do not talk about your money. And it's just really, it's like all these reasons kind of pouring in together, and then that all comes back around to, that's why we don't have enough instructors, because of all of that.
Really interesting. And I think of this a lot too, Kalen, is I think about my parents' generation, and my dad just turned 70 and my mom's 65. So my mom tells me stories about how when they were in school, high school, driver's ed was a part of school. Like when they went to school, they had to learn how to drive a car, right? Well, that's since been taken out of schools. So the two main life skills, money and driving a car, are no longer in schools. Now, of course, we just talked about, there's a movement to try to get the money aspect back in the schools, but like those, that just baffles me. I'm like, why would they take driver's ed out of school? I'm sure it has to do with funding and all that stuff. But so you're not going to teach kids how to drive a car, and you're not going to teach kids how to manage money in school. Like, what's the purpose of school? Like, those are the two important life survival skills that you can have in America. To me,
right.
that's my view. But so anyway, so that's my rant on that. So let's move on to number 3. Number 3, you cited for the third reason why finance isn't taught in school is personal finance isn't part of the ACT or SAT. If it's not tested, it's not taught. So explain that. Let everybody know what the ACT and the SAT is as well.
Sure. So whenever you have the ACT, which it seems to be more the colleges in the South in general, they care heavily about the ACT, whereas the college in the North tend to care more about the SAT. But it's just the standardized test that you take in school to kind of say where your placement's going to be. And whenever you take that test, there's not any sort of finance, there's math on it, but there's not any sort of financial knowledge that you need to know to pass those tests or to score a high score on those tests. So this kind of comes around to a mindset, and it's kind of prevalent in Robert Kiyosaki wrote the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. Anyone who's on finance blogs is familiar with that book. A lot of people love that guy. A lot of people hate him. Actually, I wrote an article on my first website about him that got really popular. I didn't expect it to. There was a lot of controversy, but it's more over him as a person and his business practices. But the things he teaches about mindset, I thought were really good, really eye-opening, because he kind of takes you out of that mindset. Like, school puts a mindset in you that this is what you do. And what do they always say? You go to school and get good grades so you can go to college and get a good job. And then people, think they do all those steps right. And you have people out here with a master's degree, and they can't find a job that pays more than $30,000 a year. And they're complaining about that because they were sold the wrong story whenever they were in school. And not necessarily the wrong story, but just that's not necessarily true. That just because you have a degree, that doesn't mean you're going to get a high-paying job. And just because you have a high-paying job, that doesn't mean you're going to have money, because it comes down to what you're doing with that money. And so it's kind of two different mindsets. It's the mindset of, you're going to go to college and you're going to work for someone else the rest of your life, and you're just going to try to make as high of a salary as you can. And then there's the other mindset that maybe says you can do that, or Maybe you could be a business owner or an entrepreneur, or instead of going to college and learning how to manage other people's businesses, you could maybe either not go to college, or you could start your own business, college or no college. And that just kind of, that mindset, the kind of the first mindset I talked about, puts all that weight on the ACT or on the SAT, just saying that whenever you're in high school, a lot of kids think the most important thing in the world is for me to go to college. So I have to get the best grades I can get while I'm in high school so that I can get into a college, because if I don't get into a good college, I'm not going to be successful. And that's really the mindset that is kind of being pushed by doing things like this, by not having finances be part of the test. The entire fact that the most important test supposedly you take in high school doesn't have anything to do with basic life skills or living, or anything that you're going to use in the quote unquote real world. It's all about paper tests and answering questions and memorizing stuff and things like that. So it really splits into two mindsets. But I would say that if it's not tested, it's not taught, does seem to be the way that things are done. I mean, the schools care about what the schools care about, and financial education, life skills, things like how to change the oil in your car, just random things, that maybe everyone should probably know how to do, whether they choose to do it or not. Driving, how to change a tire, just a basic cleaning of your house, what chemicals to use together, things like that. That stuff's not taught in schools, which ultimately, yeah, and I talk about that in the article and the video a little bit. What that does is it just leaves the responsibility on the parents. But right. then again, it kind of comes back together, because if I always say, if we don't feel, if people in general don't feel qualified to teach finances to their kids, how do you think the teachers feel? They feel the same, because they're just regular people. They just happen to be good at one subject that they teach. And whenever you leave this up to the parents, at the end of the day, it just seems like nobody knows what they're doing. So it's all up into that, self-education through the books and through the, through everything. And while we're on this point of the ACT and the SAT, like I have a bachelor's degree in finance, but I can guarantee that if I just took 10 or 15 of the books that I read out of the few hundred books that I read about finances alone, those 10 or 15 books, or possibly 5, taught me more than that 4-year degree taught me about how to actually handle my own money, how to actually manage my personal finances. I learned all kinds of accounting and things like that would be great if I wanted to have a job as an accountant. But as far as my finances are concerned, I just don't think that the degree itself really changed any of that. So it's kind of two unrelated things that now we're trying to get to be a little more related, where we're saying, hey, why don't we consider teaching some stuff that truly matters to every single kid in every person's life, instead of just teaching specialized things like calculus and trigonometry and things that are only going to be prevalent to some people's lives.
Right. And as you were saying all that, Kalen, I was thinking, I was actually having flashbacks of when I was in school. Now, I'll be honest, I'm 45 years old. So it's been a while since I've been in elementary school and middle school and stuff. So I was trying to think back of because you talked about schools not teaching life relatable skills or things that you would need in the real world. Like I mentioned, driver's ed, you talked about, changing your oil. And I was thinking about, there was a couple of classes that I took when I was probably very young, elementary school, maybe early middle school. I remember home economics, where they actually taught us how to cook, right?
Yeah.
And I don't even know if that even exists anymore in schools.
I had that.
It was home economics, and you would learn how to manage a house, right? How to cook, how to clean, how to do, but I remember the main aspect was learning how to cook, how to learn your way around a kitchen, right? All the utensils that you would use and stuff like that. So that's very practical. And then the other one I remember was there was home ec, and then there was a wood shop class that I took, right? So
Agri. Yeah.
and that was one where you basically like you learn about all the different tools, like how to use a screwdriver, how to use, a wrench, and just
Yeah.
and very practical. Now again, I don't even know if these are still taught in school. Maybe they are as electives or something like that, but those are the types of things that to me it's like school should prepare you for life, or like you said, the real world. And I think there's a big disconnect these days with because there's so much competition with the school systems and the testing scores, and we see this all the time. Just in Atlanta where I live, there's all these scandals with teachers getting fired because they lied on the test scores for their students because they're all incentivized, right? All these teachers get incentivized bonuses and raises and promotions based on the test scores that they're either their districts or their students or their schools get. So there's all these, you can look it up, you can Google Atlanta APS cheating scandal. And there was this massive cheating scandal a couple of years ago that, I mean, it's really embarrassing and a shame that that's what's come to, that we've lost our way a little bit with the values that we're teaching kids in school. So moving on to number 4, your fourth reason that you cited why money isn't taught in school. You said education is up to the states, not the feds, and each state has different ideas. So tell us more about that. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I guess that kind of about what you were saying is 12, the article I think said 12 schools or 12 states are now requiring finance to be taught.
I think it was 17.
And 17. Okay, I was like 12. Yeah, 2s and 7s look so similar. Yeah, so 17 states that are requiring finances to be taught in schools. And then you have other states, and this really does kind of go back to the last point as far as this is the mindset thing. So there's different schools of thought, no pun intended, on how this is how the schools do this and how the states do this and their laws and everything. And there's the one school of thought like you and I have where you're thinking, yeah, schools should be teaching practical things. At minimum, someone should know how to cook and maybe manage a household and a car and their finances. It would also be nice if they knew how to do some more of the sciences and the math and stuff like that. But we're kind of seeing that as the minimum. And then there's another school of thought that says schools don't have any business teaching that stuff. All that stuff should be taught at home. And, because the thing is, a lot of that stuff does change. Like it is up to the parents. We're about to get to that in the last point too. It kind of ties into this, but as far as what they do plan to teach, so some schools and some states, I should say, just say, no, you can teach what you want to teach at home, but we're going to keep that out of the schools. But then, of course, the problem is if you have met more than 10 people in your life, that people don't always have an ideal childhood. And I would say the standard is not that someone's parents spend time with them and teach them important life skills. The standard, I know for me growing up, when I was growing up, and then talking to a lot of the young airmen in the military, it still kind of seems to be the case that it's more likely than not someone's growing up in an environment where they are not taught any sort of life skills. They're not even taught how to cook and things like that, how to clean, how to manage their finances. And maybe their parents don't know how to do that. And to catch all of that, that is kind of where our school of thought would come in and say, well, then maybe just put the bare minimum, at least the basics, how to budget, and maybe leave it at that. And, how to cook a meal, like if that's not in schools anymore, things like that. Maybe we should at least put the bare amount of information in there for basic life skills. And some people are just pushing that, it all depends on what kind of environment someone grows up in. And if they're thinking, I didn't need the schools, my parents taught me all that stuff. So that's great for you. Not so much for these millions of kids who are not being taught any of this stuff in school. And now they're just left to fend for themselves. And hopefully they'll find a good mentor, whether on purpose by accident, that ends up guiding them in the right direction. But if they don't, then they're really on their own at 18 or 19 or 20 to figure this stuff out for themselves.
And Kalen, I just thought of another one for you, man. So when I was in high school, I actually this was an elective class. I took an auto mechanic class in high school, where actually bused me to another school because my school didn't have an actual car shop. There was another school so they bussed me over. I signed up for this. This was an elective class I signed up for. And again, this taught me, how to change a tire, how to change the oil, just the basic car, an overview of, hey, here's how you change a spark plug, just the basic routine maintenance of a car, right? They're not telling,
right,
building a car from scratch or anything like that. But these are life survival skills. Like, okay, I need a new battery in my car. Okay, how do I do that? Or how do I, change a tire? Or how do I change out the air filter? Just the basic stuff like that, the routine maintenance. So again, I don't know if these classes still exist or not. I've been out of high school for well over 20 years, probably 30 years now. I don't even know. So those are ones that I think back on. I'm like, these are very practical life survival skill, and the money and the finance, all these fit in the same bucket, right? So yeah, that's
right.
very, very important to have these types of opportunities for kids, because you're setting them up for success in life, right? So let's move on to the fifth and final point that you cited in your blog is the reason why finance isn't taught in school is there isn't much agreement as to which finance concepts would be taught. So share a little bit more about that. Why isn't there, why can't we come to an agreement on, I guess, a core curriculum?
Right. So this comes down to a few basic things. There's a lot of stuff that everyone can agree on. So, and that's why I say putting the bare minimum in there, like budgeting and things like that. I mean, some people aren't adamant that you have to have a budget. Some people are, but everyone can agree that if everyone just had a budget, that would at least be a start. The simple concept of knowing where your money's going, so you don't have no idea where it went. Like that's kind of the idea of the simple concepts. That gets more into this fifth point, gets more into things like credit. Like, do you need a credit score? Is credit even a good thing? Should you completely stay away from it and live debt free? Or should you base your entire life and your self-worth on your credit score and how high your credit score is? Because there's, those are both of the ditches, and then there's everything in between as far as what the importance is of a credit score. And investing's the same way. So should you invest in stocks? Are stocks way too risky? Should you stay away from stocks? Should you buy individual stocks? Should you invest in mutual funds and index funds? These are all things that people can get pretty adamant about in their own right. And life insurance, is it whole life, term life, all these things that people are super passionate about, often super passionate about the one they're selling. But whatever the concept is, the topic, whatever the topic is, you'll see that a lot. That now crypto, cryptocurrency, big new thing. I'm part of plenty of Facebook groups, people talking about crypto, and and then of course now whenever a new thing comes out, you have the people over here that say, oh, this is pure gambling. You're just gambling all your money, and the people coming in and saying that no, this is the future. And the truth almost always lies somewhere in the middle. But with as much disagreement as there is on all of these things, then it's just it's going to be hard to nail down a curriculum, which is why to just keep it practical and why I always try to do things in a way that I think are realistic about actually being implemented. That's why I say that the bare minimum, the bare necessities would be, budgeting, teaching people the concept of compound interest. You don't have to teach them what to invest in. You don't have to say you should go buy this stock. You can just say this is what happens whenever you invest your money. Maybe teaching them how stocks work, teaching them what a mutual fund is, teaching them that they have multiple options like real estate and gold and even and things like that. And just giving them kind of everything, laying it out for them. I think that would probably work. But that is a big factor in it. It's just there's just almost no agreement. And you probably know from reading finance blogs, and in writing finance blogs. You can write about the most harmless topic in the world, and if the article gets popular enough, you're going to get attacked for it.
Yeah,
That's just the way the world works.
absolutely. So Kalen, thanks so much for sharing those 5 reasons why money isn't taught in school. Now we're going to go off script a little bit because this is such a hot button issue, at least with some of the financial bloggers like ourselves and people that are just passionate, especially you with 5 kids. I have 2 now, and we may end up having more. We'll see what the future holds. But to me, that this is one of the biggest responsibility. The onus is on me, right? Because as the parent, to teach my kids about money, and so they will be financially responsible. But wrapped around this topic is there's a lot of conspiracy theories, so we can talk a little bit about that if you want to share. But really, the basic one is that I hear is, America is built on debt. Debt is a big business in America, okay? And there's a reason why they want to keep you in debt, is because it's a big business. There's companies making millions and millions of dollars on you to keep you in debt, right? So maybe that's one of the reasons why they don't want to teach you about money, and why the majority of Americans don't have a savings account. Or I'm doing all this research on retirement, and it was something like 25% of Americans have $0 saved for retirement. That's absolutely astonishing.
Yeah.
So that's what's going to happen, because this is where it starts with teaching the kids. When you teach the kids, like you said, you get them at the early age, and that all that trajectory is going to change. It's going to flip, right? Then it might be 5%. It's going to get better. But there are forces that are working against us that want to keep us in debt. And debt is a form of slavery. I hate using that word, but debt is bondage and debt is slavery. And yep. I know that you're a Christian guy and a Bible guy, and there's a lot of stuff in the Bible about money and about debt and about how if you have debt, you're slave to the lender, right? There's a verse about that. So these are some of the conspiracy theories that are wrapped around this whole concept of, why isn't money taught in schools? Well, what are there any other things that you're hearing, Kalen, or any thoughts you might have on any of that?
I mean, I think, so when it comes to me and conspiracy theories I will always listen. Like I always, like, anytime, it doesn't matter how crazy, if someone says we didn't land on the moon or the earth is flat or whatever, like I'm always curious to see, like, why do you think this? And there's some truth in what they're saying. Like, yeah, maybe they're saying the earth is flat and that part of it's not true, but if you listen to them, like, you can see how they got there, and if nothing else, you can kind of get the just kind of an insight into the human brain a little bit, and how we can go off on certain things. But this one, I mean, I almost don't think it's a conspiracy theory anymore to say that in general, like, the people with the money control the population, like, to an extent. I mean, obviously there's no mind control or anything, but if they have the money, like, they're going to be the ones ultimately making the decisions. And these people are, their money is being funded often by these huge banks and these huge credit card companies, these people that are in the debt industry, like, they sell debt for a living. And those, I mean, there's really no way to get around that. And I think it has to be acknowledged. I think most people agree. I will say that most of the world's problems, in my opinion, come back to greed. I think greed is probably the number one issue in the world. And I believe, and I know you had mentioned the Bible just as an example. I believe it's either greed or idolatry. Not adultery, but idolatry is the most mentioned sin in the Bible. And honestly, greed and idolatry are almost the same thing, because you're still idolizing something,
right?
And it's just the idolization of money is what greed is. So I think that should tell us a lot. And I'm not I mean, even in the Christian community, you see it. Like you rarely hear sermons preached on greed. You'll hear sermons preached on all kinds of other things, but we kind of tend to stay away from the money topic, whether it be because it's not something that the pastor feels confident preaching about because of his lifestyle, or whether that just be because, again, we don't like to talk about money. And it's something that we all want, and we're all afraid to talk about it, and we're afraid, especially like as Christians, we're afraid to even say we want money. And it's been interesting. I've noticed that the wealthier I've become, the more I've studied finances, the more I've done the research into this, the less and less I actually care about money. I actually
Wow.
really, it gets almost frustrating because I just see how many of the problems in the world are they stem from greed. I mean, you can call all the wars, religious wars or whatever, but those wars were fought over greed. The wars we're fighting right now are being fought over greed. And I mean, I'm a service member and everything. I love my country. That doesn't mean that I fully trust the government as an entity. And I know that the government is being powered by people with money. As conspiracy theorists as that sounds, if people have money, other people are going to listen. And I mean, it's the whole game that is politics, and people and the politicians. There are good ones out there, sure, but there are definitely those that are willing to be bought off.
Right.
Yeah.
You made me think of when you were saying all that, Kalen, I was thinking about the famous quote, those who have the gold, or the golden rule is those who have the gold make the rules.
Yes.
My friends always say that. They always say that to me. So that's a lot of truth in there, man. So just as we wrap up, Kalen, thank you so much for joining us today. Any final thoughts before we sign off? Any maybe, I don't know, what would be like the first thing that someone should do to teach their kids about money, or any other final thoughts about how do we get, how do we keep pushing this? How do we get this taught in schools? What else can we do to advocate for it?
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously buy my book. That'd be a great thing. No, yeah, the end. No, yeah. I mean, I have a lot of blogs about it as well, but the first thing that I would say, and probably the most important part, and I believe it's actually how I start my book in general, just to kind of say, if I had to tell you one thing, it would be for parents to stop keeping their kids in the dark about their finances. It would be to show them your finances, show them your budget. And I say that, and a lot of people kind of look at me funny, and those are usually the people that don't have a budget. I get that, yeah, the deer in the headlights. Yeah, got that Home Alone look going on. Yeah. That's the norm, because most people don't budget. And I'm pretty sure the statistics are skewed too, because they say even the percentage that supposedly budget, I think they just asked people if they budgeted, and they're just going off their responses. But I would say that showing your kids your finances, if you're doing great things financially, if you're budgeting, investing, doing well, show them that. Like, show them your success. If you're not doing well, show them your mistakes. Don't be afraid. Like, they already know you're not perfect. Like, we like to think they don't, but I mean, they understand that, and we can show them, this is where I messed up. I'm paying off this whatever loan because I took out this, I bought a car or a credit card, or whatever mistakes they made, and you can show them how you're fixing your finances. Whatever the case, just don't hide your finances from your kids. Like, show them your finances. Encourage them not to talk to their friends on the playground about it. It's more private business with the family, or you don't just need to be running your mouth about other people's finances, like thus being your parents. But don't keep them in the dark. Like, don't let them wait until they're 18 years old or 20 years old and go into college or going into the workforce before they start ever budgeting for the first time, or just spending their own money. Show them that stuff, and even if you don't think you're doing a good job, them seeing it at a younger age, how spending money even works, how saving money, just the fact that you have the option to spend or save, them seeing that at a younger age is going to set them up for financial success more than just keeping them in the dark.
That is very well said, Kalen. I really appreciate those final thoughts, and just something for us all to think about as we. And it doesn't have to be your kids. It could be you might have young kids, nieces, nephews, neighbors, church.
Yeah.
You might teach a Sunday school class at church. So it could just be any kids in your life that you can instill, knowledge of financial literacy, and you're going to give them that freedom in the future that they are going to be able to control their money and not let their money take control of them. So as we close, Kalen, I want to let you have the opportunity to, you mentioned your book, and I mentioned your website at the beginning of the show here. Let everybody know how they can connect with you. And I do want to let everyone know Kalen's website there's a wealth of knowledge and information on there. And I do highly encourage you guys to go check it out. He has a lot of really good resources there. So Kalen, tell us how we can connect with you.
Yeah, so freedomsprout.com is the best way. If you go on there, you can see on the main page, there's guides on everything from kids and buying their first car to time management with kids to, gratitude, budgeting, all that stuff is on there. There's a lot of videos on there now. My YouTube channel is growing, and you can see my books on there. So Intentional Children that you had mentioned at the beginning, great for parents with kids still in the home. It doesn't really matter what age they are, as long as they're still in the home. That's great for the parents to teach your kids about money and kind of mindfulness in general and intentional living. And then there's also 10 Branches of Growth, which is my first book. That's better for if your kids, or if you have young adults who have recently moved out of the house and you want to give them something that can kind of set them up, everything that I wished I had known when I was 18, making all these mistakes that I know now as a financial coach, and just where I'm at in my wealth journey now. It's everything for 18 to say 25-year-olds. But honestly, I've had 40 and 50-year-olds read it and say that they got a whole lot out of it, and it was great for them as well. So, but it's all there, freedomsprout.com. I try to keep it all together. I even have a little free email course to raise money smart kids. So yeah, you can see it all there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kalen, and everybody go check that out. And of course, we'll link all your stuff into the description below, your YouTube channel, your website, and your books as well. So I want to say thank you, Kalen Bruce, so much for your time today and sharing your knowledge on this. I know we're both very passionate about this topic of changing the next generation of kids and instilling financial literacy into them. And once again, my name is Jason Brown. If you want to learn more about me and my endeavors, you can check out my website, which is yourmarginmatters.com. And for Kalen and me, thank you so much. And to remember my favorite saying, it's not the amount of money you make, but the margin that matters the most. We will see you next time.